Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 381 for October 2nd, 2025. Hey everyone, Gino Rubino here, joined with Zac Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. We are back after a brief hiatus, and we got a lot to talk about. So, Windows 10 ESU, we'll explain what ESU is and why you should care, and now that it's free, at least for some people. 25H2 is now released. We'll talk about why that is and is not exciting at the same time. There was a big announcement. Well, actually, I don't know if it was an announcement, but it was a leaked memo that there's going to be a big reorganization going on in the Windows division yet again. And Zac will put that to perspective and what that means and why this is happening. And the reason we weren't available last week, I was covering Qualcomm and their Snapdragon X2 Elite announcement. So we'll go through that and why it's a big deal and what we can kind of expect from those chips and when we can expect those chips. Microsoft 365 Premium. So this is they're merging Copilot finally into Microsoft 365, well, at least the Pro version. And this is actually sounds like a pretty good deal, but we'll break it down. And then finally, the bad news, Xbox Game Pass, at least the top tier version, is getting a significantly massive price hike for somewhat dubious reasons, at least reasons that aren't making a lot of people happy. So we'll break that down as well. Zac, how are you doing on this fine Thursday?
I'm not too bad. I am tired. It feels like the last 2 weeks have just been non-stop. So much news out of nowhere. It feels like we had a really quiet summer, and then suddenly the second sort of mid-September began. News. Just every day there was some big bit of news regarding Microsoft or the PC industry, and it just hasn't stopped. So yeah, I'm actually quite energized. I'm feeling quite enthusiastic about the industry right now. For a little while, I kind of felt like, oh, Windows is boring, PCs are boring, but now suddenly everything's really interesting again. So I'm actually quite happy to see all this stuff. How are you?
Not too bad. Still recovering from I'm pretty much recovered from Hawaii. I it's a 13-hour flight, give or take,
Wow.
to and from. And I do take a little break over at Seattle and thank God I have a Delta Lounge membership, which it was really nice because that breaks it up. But yeah, it's still a pretty long flight, but it's good. It was great seeing a lot of my old colleagues there and hearing all the big news and stuff like that. And then I actually came home a day early just because we had a thing called Punk in the Park, which is a punk rock festival happening right here in Worcester. And it's only one of like a couple places where they're doing this. And so it's a bunch of bands playing, including like Face to Face and Bad Religion. And then there was also 3 hours of local beer tasting, which was
Nice.
amazing. Yeah, you paid $15 and they give you a little glass that says Punk in the Park, and you just go up and they just pour you beers and you try them out. It's good for local businesses, obviously, because there are a lot of beers I hadn't heard of before. And it was also just a great day we had beautiful weather. So it was just kind of fun to see that. Although it is funny because all those bands have been around for a very long time. And so the audience is pretty much, well, like my age, so old. There were some young people there, and there are also people there my age with their kids, which is really funny. It's just funny because punk rock has always been this kind of like edgy thing. You think of like 16 to 20-year-old people, and everybody here was gray, including the people in the bands who are hitting 50 and 60 years old at this point. But it was an amazing day. I had a really, really good time. So it was exhausting after Hawaii, but totally worth it. But no one wants to hear all that, I suppose. Let's get right into the Windows 10 ESU, which define what ESU is for people, why it's important, and what exactly happened with it this week. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, so the ESU is Microsoft's program for extended security updates. That's what ESU stands for. And it's a program for people who are unable to move off Windows 10 after its end of support date, which is very fast approaching. We're now 2 weeks away, essentially, from Windows 10's mainstream support coming to an end. And so the ESU program is very important because it will allow millions of Windows 10 users to continue using their PC securely for at least an additional year, up to 3 years if you're an enterprise, but certainly for an extra year if you are a consumer. Now, the ESU program, although it is offering an additional year of security updates, hasn't been without its own controversies. The reasons for being, it's a program that technically asks something of its user. Like if you want access to the program, you have to give Microsoft something in exchange, whether that be money, Microsoft reward points, or data. And in this case, Microsoft was saying you can have access to the program for free, but you have to sign in with a Microsoft account and sync your PC settings and data to the cloud via OneDrive. If you did that, then you'd be given access to the ESU program and you can keep using your Windows 10 PC for an additional year at no extra cost. Now, that rubbed a few people the wrong way, and people in the EU, in the European Economic Area, found that to be very distasteful and, in fact, possibly in breach of the Digital Markets Act. So consumer rights organization, consumer rights advocate groups wrote a letter to Microsoft, and Microsoft turned around and said, yeah, it turns out you're probably right. And so we're going to release that requirement that you have to sync your data with the cloud. So in the EU and in European economic markets, the program, the requirements for entry to the program have changed. It's now technically entirely free. There is no exchange. The only requirement that is still in place is that you do need to sign in with a Microsoft account at least once every 60 days, just to renew your sort of existence within the program. If you don't do it within 60 days, you will be kicked out of the program. There's no penalty for doing that. You can just sign back in and then you'll keep getting the security updates, but it's something you've got to keep doing.
Please, try it. Sign into it.
Right.
Us, please.
It's really, it has been designed in a way that benefits users who are already using a Microsoft account. If you have linked your local account with a Microsoft account, you won't have to do this. You'll just keep getting the updates for the additional year. If you're somebody using a local account, you'll be able to sign into the program that allows you to enroll in the ESU. Then you can sort of unlink your Microsoft account, use your PC for 60 days, and then do the whole process again every 60 days if you want. It's a bit of a pain in the backside, but it is Microsoft quite clearly trying to tell you, hey, just sign in with a Microsoft account. If you do that, we won't bother you for the next year. I think Euroconsumers, who's one of the consumer rights advocate groups who wrote these letters to Microsoft, I don't think they're too happy with this concession that Microsoft has made. It's better than nothing, I guess, but there's still issues that they would like Microsoft to address, which, I don't know if they will at this point. There's only 2 weeks left. And I think what Microsoft has delivered is technically legal in the eyes of the Digital Markets Act and whatnot. And so unless there's any major developments there, I think this will be how the ESU operates in the EEA. This is only for, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say the EEA, all I'm thinking about right now is they probably also requested an extra 6 weeks of vacation. Is that how this is being? It's Europe.
Yes.
And they want something else for free. So.
Yeah, definitely. There was something I was going to say. What was I going to say about it? Yes, this only applies to markets in the EEA. If you are outside of that, if you're in America or Canada or Australia, this doesn't apply to you. You still have to sign in and sync your PC settings with the cloud to get free access to the ESU program. So this really is just for markets in the European Economic Area. And it's technically a win for the people in those markets, but it's still kind of a pain in the backside to get free access to that program. What these consumer rights groups really want is they want the program to be free and automatic, because right now you have to still enroll your PC. If you do nothing come October 14, your PC will be in an unsecured state, and that could lead to problems down the line, especially if vulnerabilities are discovered in Windows 10. So if you're somebody who's not tuned into tech news and you haven't seen all the warnings and pop-ups that have likely been appearing on your PC if you're still using Windows 10, and you keep using your PC for another year without actually doing anything to make it more secure, you could be at risk. So these consumer rights groups are arguing that the ESU program should be automatic. There shouldn't be an enrollment process. It should just be that the updates are delivered to users for as long as they're made. And so we'll see if that ends up happening. But by that point, just extend mainstream support. Like, what are we doing in that point? So, we'll see how that goes there. But it is really interesting because alongside this news, StatCounter published their latest sort of data for the usage numbers when it comes to Windows. And everybody knows StatCounter isn't an entirely accurate measure. It can't be, because StatCounter isn't a thing that ships in Windows. It's a thing that tracks, I believe, ads or different websites. And so it's a taste of like market trends rather than accurate numbers for overall usage. So keep that in mind as we talk about this next bit real quick. But this week, it was discovered that last month, Windows 7 gained a shocking 10% market share. That's insane. That has not happened ever, I don't think. If you take a look at the Stat Counter website, Windows 7 has been basically 2% flat for years now, since around 2022, probably 2021. And then suddenly, in August, it grew to 3%, suspiciously. And now in September, it's grown to 9.61%, rounding up. That's 10%. Meanwhile, Windows 11 stalled. It didn't gain any real market share in the last month. And Windows 10 dropped, I think, from something like 43% to 40%. So Windows 10 is slowly dropping. That makes sense. Windows 11 not growing is a concern, especially at this point where people should be moving to Windows 11 more than ever now, because Windows 10 support is basically come to an end. But instead of Windows 11 growing, we saw Windows 7 grow and Windows 11 stay flat. Now, a few people have some theories as to why this may have been. Stat Counter's data is just wrong. Could be a glitch. Could be that they've misrepresented some data. Other people have said it's certain markets. The problem is it doesn't make sense to downgrade to Windows 7. Windows 7 is also out of support.
What drivers work on that? Like if you had a GPU, would it work?
I don't doubt that there are some people who, given Windows 10 support coming to an end, they've gone, you know what? If I'm gonna have to run an out of support OS, I might as well run one I like and try to daily drive Windows 7. I think you'll very quickly find that, as Dan mentioned, a lot of apps and drivers just don't work anymore. They just aren't going to be compatible with that platform. Older Windows 10 PCs might have a better time, especially when because a lot of us forget, most Windows 10 PCs were PCs that were released in the Windows 7 days, especially at this point, because none of those can upgrade to Windows 11. And so it would be easier to downgrade to Windows 7 from Windows 10 on an older Windows 10 PC from like 2011, 2012. But that doesn't fix the app compatibility problem. I'm pretty sure a lot of apps just don't work on Windows 7 anymore. Now, I know there are third-party frameworks and projects designed to make Windows Vista, Windows 7 more compatible with modern apps. I haven't dove into that too much. I don't really think that there's enough people to suggest 10% of the entire Windows market is suddenly using Windows 7 again. I think that number is certainly inflated. I don't doubt that there is a more than unusual amount of people trying to use Windows 7 currently, but I don't think it's 10%. If anything, it might be an additional percent, if anything. But that's just really interesting to see that happen. And it's something, if those numbers are even close to being remotely accurate, that's something Microsoft should be very concerned about, because if people are rather downgrading to Windows 7 than go to Windows 11, then there's a problem with Windows 11 that they need to address. And I think I've noticed this opinion more this year than any other year since Windows 11's launch. People don't like Windows 11. I feel like, when it was announced, it sort of, other than the system requirements issue, it sort of launched to high praise. I think a lot of people were okay with it. But over the last 2 years, I really feel like it's just dropped in reputation. A lot of people just don't like Windows 11. They don't like what Microsoft is doing to Windows. They don't really like some of the changes it's made, or the ads and the bloatware. I put in quotation marks because I've looked at Windows 10, the most recent version of Windows 10. It is worse than Windows 11 when it comes to ads and when it comes to bloatware. I'm going to have to put this into an article. So I think there's just a lot of fake news about Windows 11.
That's the way it is. Because people are human beings. The theme of this podcast are terrible.
Yeah.
They're terrible at everything. They're terrible at memory. They're terrible at accuracy. I mean, none of that surprises me. But before you go on, I just want to address something. Someone says, because people have been dropping Windows 10 and moving to Linux, thus dropping the pool size and making the pool of Windows 7 seem bigger. The premise of this, I feel, is a little bit wrong. It is true Linux has grown. Linux technically grows every year. I don't think, though, it's grown like 10%.
No.
Because, or, shrunk it enough that Windows 7 can grow 10% and grow in quotes, right? I do have some stats here. So going by Stat Counter, Linux went from... it's 3.9% of the global desktop market. That's the highest recorded share in their data sheet. So 3.9% global. Gaming, and this is really, I kind of think, the big thing. Steam's hardware survey shows Linux at 2.89% among desktop gamers, up from 2.76%. So it's gone up like 0.12%. Okay, so since 2002. Or 2022, I should say. And a lot of that is going to be, Steam Deck, right? Steam Deck is Linux technically, so it counts. In the United States, Stat Counter's June 2025 numbers put Linux at 5% of the OS market, a notable jump from 4.44% in 2024. So it's gone from 3% in 2023 to 4% to 5%. Okay. That's, that's good. It is growth for Linux. I think a lot of that, like I said, is probably Steam Deck, which kind of doesn't count, but will count here in that case. But that I don't think is enough to account
No.
for
Yeah.
these changes. So I could be wrong on that, but I don't think so. I don't think that many people are going to Linux. And if they do, they're going to come back because it's still not that good.
That's
At least for
hilarious.
mainstream people.
Yeah.
Especially the people we're going to be talking about really when it comes to Windows 10, when it actually does run out of support.
Yeah.
You have a lot of people who just have a laptop that they occasionally use. They're not power users. These people are not, I'm sorry to say, going to go and research a bunch of Linux distros and download those and figure out how to load it up and which programs they can get and their drivers. It's not going to happen. People who are really into tech, they may do that, or they may downgrade to Windows 7, apparently. So I don't know. We'll see.
I'll say that to add to that, I feel like people who are capable of researching and installing and even
Right.
daily driving Linux, I don't think
Are-
the end of Windows 10 support is the reason for that to happen to them now. Like they would have done this ages ago. Windows 10 hasn't changed in years. They weren't happy with Windows 10. It's nothing changes. Also, those people can also figure out how to get Windows 10
to
updates.
bypass.
Yeah, for free for the next 3 years or even longer, up to 2032, because LTSC exists and those will probably still apply to client if you hack them on there. And even in addition to that, you can just upgrade to Windows 11 even on unsupported hardware. Very easy. These people can do it. It's
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of options for the people who are technically capable of going to Linux, but I don't think most people are going to switch to Linux. I know you, and not to mention, you probably see more people. It's funny actually. If we revisit that argument and replace it with Mac OS, that makes more sense. I guarantee more people are switching to Mac OS than they are switching to Linux.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm sorry, Linux fans, but that's probably not the case. But more people will probably definitely buy Macs because Apple has had some pretty good quarters with their MacBooks. It's still not enough, but and just like Linux, they've been growing quarter by quarter, but it's been like 0.5% here, 0.25% there. Sure, over a half a decade, that's going to add up to something, but it's still pretty far behind where Windows is.
Yeah. So yeah, that's essentially the Windows 10 end of life news. Apparently, it's reviving Windows 7. I highly doubt it actually is, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a small group of people at least trying to revive this older version of Windows, because I know Windows 7 holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts, as does Windows XP. Which, by the way, Windows XP, if you like Crocs and you like Windows XP, Microsoft is giving away a bunch of Windows XP themed Crocs. You can enter sweepstakes on the Microsoft Instagram account. Sadly, they're not for sale, at least not yet. I would rather just buy them. I don't want to enter a competition.
Yeah, I don't know if they
weird.
were just permanently switching to the contest thing, right?
Microsoft
because we
seems
saw this with
really
the laptop
because
50th.
they're really against selling this like limited of run 50th anniversary merch slash
I mean,
stuff,
yeah.
right? They've not sold anything like this whole year. Like it's such an easy way to make a quick buck. I bought a Surface Laptop 7. I would have bought another one for that 50th retro Microsoft logo.
So, yeah.
It's just like I just don't get why they don't do it. It's insane.
I should say, if rumors are correct, I should be receiving a pair of these Crocs later today.
Aren't you lucky?
Am I?
You got
Am I? It will be my first Crocs, so
Nice.
don't judge me. I'm not a Croc guy, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Why don't you describe these Crocs and why they are kind of interesting?
So they are Windows XP themed. They feature the iconic Bliss wallpaper, the green rolling hills with the blue sky and clouds. And they also come with Microsoft themed gibbets. So all the sort of classic icons from the 2000s, MSN, Internet Explorer, Clippy, all of those. Gibbets, for those who don't know, if you've ever taken a look at a Croc, you've got those sort of holes at the front, horrendous. But they were very smart, and they built these little accessories that you can put into the holes, and so they sort of just hang out as extra icons, whatever you want on your shoes. So if you want to style your shoe with Microsoft icons, you can do that, and they come with the Windows XP Crocs, which is cool.
Ladies.
Could you imagine?
I'm gonna show up, I don't
At the club.
Oh, actually, in fact, great. My dogs are going to bark.
Oh, they hear.
But UPS just pulled up with my Crocs. So
Looks like the Crocs.
well,
Dan can show us those in a minute.
Yeah, I could do a live unboxing, right? So maybe I'll do that. We'll see.
All right. Well, with that in mind, let's move on to our next topic real quick. There's not much to say here. Version 25H2, it's finally here. We've been expecting this for, I want to say, over a month at this point. The bits have basically been done for a while, and it's now officially generally available. And what that means is it's now beginning to roll out via Windows Update to production PCs. So if you're a normal user, in the next few weeks, however long it takes, you will get a prompt to download version 25H2. And if you're running 24H2, the good news is it's an enablement package. So it's a very small update. It doesn't actually change anything, really. It just flips a couple of switches behind the scenes, and that moves your build number up a bit, and also gives you the 25H2 versioning over 24H2. There are no new features in 25H2. I know there's a lot of misinformation about this, even from Microsoft, who are sort of trying to highlight new features that are in 25H2. There are no new features in 25H2. 25H2 and 24H2 are based on the exact same platform release. They are the same build. They are the same release. The only difference is there's a couple of switches that, as I mentioned, flip the branding and whatnot. But two, some features may roll out first on 25H2 because of how feature control works. Microsoft can flip features on for 25H2 and leave them off for a bit longer on 24H2 before flipping them on. But ideally, at least for the next year, everything that comes to 25H2 will also come to 24H2. The feature set is identical. And so if you're trying to upgrade to 25H2 in the hopes for finding new features, you won't find them. As things currently stand, there is no feature difference between the two releases. As I said, maybe down the line, a couple of features will come first to 25H2, but they will also trickle down to 24H2 as well. And so keep that in mind. There's no new features. That makes this release very boring. There's basically nothing to it. All it does is it resets the support clock. So it has 24 months of support for Home and Pro and 36 months of support for Enterprise and Education. And so if you upgrade to 25H2 as soon as possible, you'll be supported for the longest amount of time it's actually available, versus sticking with 24H2, which is only supported for another 12 months on Home and Pro, and 18 months, whatever it is, 16 months for Education, and the other one, Enterprise. So there's no reason not to upgrade. There's no compatibility differences. There's no performance differences. It's the same update, really. It just means you get new features sooner when they do start rolling out in the coming weeks. And we are expecting new features, quite a lot of new features to come, even some that haven't been announced. We are expecting a big dark mode overhaul, which has been leaked in the insider builds in the last few weeks. We're also expecting a new start menu, which Microsoft has already announced. That's still not rolling out yet. And so all of this is to come, and a lot of it will probably land on 25H2 first, before becoming enabled on 24H2 in the weeks following. And so that's fun and exciting and all of that good stuff. Now let's get on to the big news of the week in regards to Windows, and that's the reorg. So this week it was announced internally at Microsoft that the company is reorganizing its Windows teams. Now, to give some sort of flavor and context to this, up until this week, since 2018, the Windows team has essentially been split in two. When Terry Myerson left, shortly after he left, I believe this sort of took place, the senior leadership team decided to split Windows up. So there was the Windows Experiences team, and then there was the sort of Windows Core team. And the Core team went under Azure, and the Windows Experiences team sort of remained as the Windows in the separate Windows org. And what this basically led to is Azure sort of leading platform work. Azure does all the underlying Windows sort of kernel, Windows NT, lower level platform stuff. They're the platform team, essentially, to simplify things. And then the Windows team, the actual Windows team, handled all of the experiences, the features, the look and feel of the operating system that sat on top of the platform. And so since 2018, these two teams have been very separate. Of course, they've had to work together, but for the most part, they've been separate. And the reason for that, I don't really think we know the official reason for why they made that decision. It could be to do with the mess that Windows Core OS was under Terry Myerson. I think maybe Microsoft wanted to give Windows to an air quotes sensible group at the time after Windows Core sort of crashed and burned, and so that's why Azure took over the core of the platform, because it's more than just client that rides on the core of Windows, right? It's server, it's IoT, it's Xbox. There's a lot riding on the core of Windows. It isn't just Windows 11, the client version of Windows. There's a lot of Windows products at Microsoft. So they gave it to Azure. Go, Azure, you guys are sensible. You can sort of stabilize this and keep it, safe to use. And then all the other teams can sort of operate around you and align with your schedule. And that's kind of what happened. Azure decided to ship Windows platform. Oh well, they still ship Windows platform releases twice a year, even though we don't get them twice a year. We rarely get them once a year these days. The client teams have sort of tried to align their schedules without the Azure team and tried to align with platforms. It doesn't always work, and so we get cases like 25H2, which is actually based on the last year's platform release versus a new one. But as of this week, Microsoft internally announced that they are re-merging those teams. So the core team is moving out of Azure and back into the Windows organization. And there was a memo sent out to employees, which was obtained by The Verge, and they put some quotes in there. So this was a memo written by Pavan Devaluri, which is the Windows boss, current Windows boss. And he said, this change unifies the Windows engineering work under a single organization. Moving the teams working on Windows client and server together into one organization brings focus to delivering against our priorities. In that same memo, he also says that this restructure will help the company deliver our vision of Windows as an agentic OS. So this is a big deal. This is the first time, as I mentioned, since 2018, where essentially all of Windows is back under the same roof, in charge by a single person. So why are they doing this now? Well, I think it's probably obvious, right? Microsoft in this current era of AI, I think it makes more sense to have control from the top down in regards to what happens at the low level and at the surface of the operating system, so that they can coherently build something together. As things have been in the last, since 2018 up till now, these teams have been working together, and I think this is a formalization of that anyway. But also, because Azure was operating on its own schedule, that sort of limited the Windows client experiences team as to how they ship and when they ship. In Windows 10, when Windows 10 was still current, and it's just before Windows 11, we were getting one version update. No, we were getting two version updates a year, right? And one of them was based on last year's platform, and then there was a new platform release at the end of the year. That's kind of how it was going, and that's because the client team couldn't really keep up with the platform releases, and so they just stopped. And then we had, what did we have? Something else happened. Basically, the point is that the schedules often didn't align. And last year was really interesting with 24H2, where we had that sort of early release for ARM, but then 24H2 for everybody else didn't ship until the fall. So there was a weird sort of gap between 24H2 being made generally available, but only for a certain architecture, and then it coming out to everyone later this year. And I think with the two teams sort of going under the same roof, that will allow the company to sort of streamline those schedules and streamline those processes. I also think, and this is a complete guess, but having conversations with people internally, I'm under the impression that the continuous innovation thing that Microsoft is currently doing, where they basically ship features every month, is because of the Azure schedule, where platform releases were coming twice a year and rarely lining up with what Microsoft wanted to do with new features. So the client team just started releasing features all the time. They develop features now on the stable platform. They no longer develop features at the bleeding edge alongside the platform, because they just can't do it that way. And it was definitely more complicated when platform was a separate team at the company. But now with them being put together, I do wonder if maybe we're going to go back to maybe once a year big feature updates. I'm not saying that they'll just hold everything back until October, but instead of getting new features every month, including things like a start menu, like a new start menu would have been in the past a big deal, right? They'd be like, oh, we'll time this for like a big fall release. Now they just sort of drop those things whenever they want. I wouldn't be surprised with this reorg if we go back to once a year big feature update that actually has some features in it. We might get some smaller stuff throughout the year still, like those feature drops, which Panos Panay was sort of briefly doing with his Daniel Windows 11. But this current strategy of continuous innovation, where we get new features essentially every month, I just don't think it's working. I don't think people internally like it. People who work on the product, I don't think they like it. And I also don't think users like it. I think people who aren't fans of Microsoft don't like that every month Windows are changing and getting a new thing here and a new thing there without any real announcement or preparation. And also, I think it impacts the quality of the product. I think because features ship so often now, Windows is less stable than it used to be. People have more issues with it because things are changing all the time. And so if Microsoft just took a step back and sort of slowed down a bit and was able to acquire the platform team under the same roof again and go, right, let's time this. Let's do a big platform release this fall with XYZ features that rely on these platform changes to be made ahead of time so we can time it all together. That makes more sense to me. And I think that's what Pavan Davuluri wants to do and is why he's reorged the Windows team back together. It just makes sense to have control top down so you can align schedules, feature APIs and requirements and underlying platform work to deliver on a product at a set time. Because Windows, famously internally, terrible at schedules. They just can't meet schedules. They are always delaying things internally. And so hopefully this will help improve that. And also perhaps lay the groundworks for a Windows 12. I know there's sort of been some conversation this week about, well, is a Windows 12 going to happen? Is the reorg sort of laying the foundations for that? Here's what I'll say about the potential for a Windows 12. And I say Windows 12, what I mean is Windows V Next, something beyond Windows 11. It could be anything. It might be Windows Skylight. It could call it what it doesn't matter. The point is will we get something beyond Windows 11? And I think, yes, I think internally at Microsoft right now, Microsoft is building experiences that could very easily become a new version of Windows or a new version of a Microsoft operating system if they wanted it to be. But that's if they want it to be. They don't have to. There's some significant platform developments in the work and have been for a number of years at this point, frankly. A lot of new features and user experiences that sit on top of that, which are very different from what we sort of know today as Windows. And this is all in the wake of AI. In that memo, Pavan says, we want to try and build or turn Windows into an agentic OS. Windows isn't there yet. Whatever's shipping on Windows today is not an agentic. It's just not an agentic OS. It isn't. There's been all this talk of agentic OS capabilities, this idea of voice being a primary input method alongside keyboard and mouse. This is what this reorg is all about. It's aligning the teams so that they can deliver on this vision that they have publicly acknowledged is something they want to deliver, an agentic OS. It is happening. And all I will say on that front is I would be very surprised if that ships as Windows 11 version 27H2. I think they would like to make a bigger deal of that when it is ready to be shipped. And so is a Windows 12 on the cards? I think it is. I think Windows 12, air quotes, is likely. Will it be a direct upgrade from Windows 11? Will it be an entirely new sort of line of operating system that ships alongside Windows 11? Those are the questions I can't answer. Could it be a Windows 10X, Windows 11, Windows 10 situation? Could it be a continuation of Windows 11 into a Windows 12? Don't know. But I would be very shocked if we don't get another new version of Windows in the next 2 or 3 years. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this, Dan? Do you think this is what this reorg is all about? Do you foresee a Windows 12 happening anytime soon? I'm curious.
Well, the first thing I want to talk about is the feature update idea. I do think Microsoft should move away from just dropping new features. Like, in a way, I get it. And I think some of it kind of came out of the pandemic with the idea they had to pivot fast and try to adjust the operating system for what was the new reality for a lot of people with working from home and shifting working styles. That said, I think the issue is when you get away from that, and instead of having one giant feature drop, is you don't get to really tell a story. Your PR for it is just really kind of bad, right? Because you don't, like, Apple still gets on stage, and Samsung too. They'll talk about their new operating systems, or One UI thing, or Google will talk about Android, but they can talk about it as a cohesive update. Like, this is what's coming in version da da da, and then they go through all the major features. They show real world examples, and you can actually kind of get excited about some of the stuff, especially if it's coming soon, in the next couple of weeks. You can be like, oh, that actually does look really neat. Oh, that looks fun too. And you get to tell that story. And I think consumers, especially, are just trained for that sort of experience these days. I joked about it a lot on this podcast about how, thanks to Apple, and I say that sarcastically, we now have to, companies like Samsung and Google have to release new phones every year around the same time, regardless of whether there's actually true innovation going on with the hardware, just because Apple for a long time was so far behind that they just did fast releases to try to catch up. And so now everybody does this yearly cadence, like you just can bet on it, right? You know, there's going to be another version of Android next year. It's just going to keep going on and on. And now Microsoft has kind of broke away from that mold, and I don't think people kind of care for it because it's hard to keep track of things. It's hard to get excited about stuff. It's spread out all over in the different branches on the insider channels. So yeah, I think them getting back to and making a thing out of it at a Build or Ignite, choose your venue, would be kind of cool just to have the good old days where people were on stage and would demo new features that are coming to Windows. And plus, companies can use that as an opportunity to sort of judge feedback, right? Because you're going to go look at the metrics for social and everything, what people are talking about. And so if they're talking about one feature a lot, then they can tune their advertising towards that feature. And, since it seems to be popular already. So I do think there's like a big missed opportunity here. It's bad messaging. I mean, I run a site called Windows Central. I have a tough time telling you what's new in the latest version of Windows, because it's just kind of spread out and it's just hard to delineate. So it's just not a fun way of doing things anymore. So I really do hope they move away from it. Windows 12, I think, is a brilliant idea. I think they should do a Windows 12 because, again, we just talked about how every couple of years or every year, these companies are already doing mandatory updates, right? In fact, Apple just made, was it iOS 26, which the 26 represents the year. So you just know there's going to be an iOS 27 announced next September. And so I'm not saying Microsoft needs to do it every year, although that would be kind of cool if they could. But every 3 years, having like a new OS version, I think could be interesting. You don't need to put the limits in for hardware like you did with Windows 10 to Windows 11. These could just be more in name than anything, but bring a fresh look to the operating system, tweak up the start menu, all that kind of stuff. I think this would be good. Now, we've talked about this also in the past about how Microsoft has issues with supporting enterprise and, version numbers and all this kind of stuff, because then you got to, how long do you support that, right? We're literally going through that right now with Windows 10. So there is that thing. But if you think about a Windows 12, but being based off of Windows 11 and modified, you just put those things together, I guess. But I hope they do a Windows 12. There is, I think, a lot of opportunity to do some cool stuff. I think audiences have been pretty clear that despite Apple getting a lot of flack for iOS 26's, what do they call it? The glass effect.
Liquid glass.
Liquid glass. People do want not that, but they do appreciate Mica and the clear, translucent approach to Windows. It just looks more futuristic. People have done mock-ups of this already, and it would be a revisit back to Vista Aero, which a lot of people really liked but missed out on because they didn't have the hardware that could run it. But now today we do have that kind of stuff. So I think there's a real opportunity here to make a fresh looking operating system. If they want to, but I don't know, don't forget that they are fixated on AI, but then again, I think that's where that kind of comes in. You make a Windows 12, the first agentic AI operating system, kind of built from the ground up with AI as not just a fly out, right? Because that's kind of where we are right now. It's a fly out, and they've been modifying it and it's been getting better. But true AI in Windows needs to be something that's proactive, right? That it's going to do stuff for you in advance and suggest things for you as like a secretary, like someone's looking over your shoulder and being like, hey, do you want to do this? You want me to do that? But they're going to have to walk a fine line in doing that between being helpful and annoying. And that's going to be, I think, tricky as well.
Yeah, I think you're totally right about going back to it. Doing an annual feature update, I think, would go a long way to giving Windows presence again in, the tech space. I think for a long time, there isn't a moment for Windows in the year anymore. Windows doesn't get its moment. Android gets its moment. Mac OS gets its moment. iPad OS gets its moment. But Windows doesn't. There just isn't a moment in the year where people can go, oh, it's March now, which means we should be hearing about what's coming next for Windows soon. We just don't have that. It never happens in the year. And so I think for even in just mainstream society, Windows has fallen out of interest for a lot of people. Nobody thinks about Windows anymore because nobody knows when the next Windows is, or what's coming in the next Windows, because there isn't a next Windows. There's just the current Windows, and it gets a new feature every month, and there's no big deal made, and it just is what it is. It kind of does suck, and so that nothing bad comes from going back to an annual feature update. I think it helps everyone. It even helps users. I think users prefer that as well, because then at least they can research what's coming in the next version. At least they can be aware of and prepare for the changes Microsoft are making to Windows, versus being sort of blindsided every month with a security patch that added a new start menu, because that's what's going to happen with this new start menu. It will just appear for people and be like, why is this different? I don't want it to be different, but it is now. And so, yeah, I think it would give Windows presence, and it just makes it easier for everyone, even internally. Like, I think building with a set deadline, and if you miss the deadline, it's not the end of the world. There's next year. I get that, it's kind of a pain in the back to have to wait a year if you're, developing this feature and you miss it by a few weeks. At the same time, it's only a year. You'll be all right. And then, I'm not saying it has to be reserved exclusively for once a year new features. You can do feature drops every, 3 months in between. It doesn't make a huge difference. You could do if you did a Windows 12 in 2026, 2027, you could do, I wouldn't say Windows 12.1. I think we're done with the point of things of Windows. We've argued about this for endlessly. It doesn't work for Windows, and that's fine. But we can still do feature drops in between for Windows 12, until there is a major feature drop a year after Windows 12 ships. I don't think it matters. And as long as we do just have that moment in the year where Microsoft can get up on stage, ideally around the same time every year, whether March, April, May, go, hey, here's Windows version, whatever it is. Here's what's coming, and they can announce all the changes. Go, this will be shipping in October, and then they can start testing the features that announced over the course of the summer. That's what they did with Windows 11. They had that event in June. Ideally, they would have had that event a little bit earlier, so there's a little bit more time to test the features, but they did it in June anyway, and then insiders got the features over the summer, and then it all shipped in October. They could do that if they held on a Windows event every year in March or April. Here's the next version of Windows. Here's all the new stuff we've been working on. Insiders can start testing it from next week. And then over the course of throughout the spring and into the summer, they test it. Then it ships in the fall. I don't see why that can't be a thing. And then, between October and March, April again, that's when they can test the feature drops. So, there's those smaller updates in between where they sort of refine things or add a couple of additional things that did just miss the window for the RTM for the main release. I think that could work, and I don't understand why Microsoft doesn't understand that. I genuinely think continuous innovation is hurting Windows. It's not helping it. They should revise this. They should reevaluate how they deliver Windows as a product. And I think going back to one major feature update a year, based on perhaps a new platform, it doesn't have to be every year, but more often than currently, is a good idea. I think doing a new major version of Windows every 3 years still makes sense in between. And we can also have minor feature drops every now and then for those features that just sort of kind of can get out and they're not major and don't really change much. That's also totally fine as well. I think everybody would be happy with that. I don't see the problem with it. It gives Windows a boost every few years. It gives Windows presence every year alongside macOS and Android. Nobody thinks about Windows anymore. And I think that's why a lot of people are falling out of love with it. And, in some cases, forgetting about it. I feel like people on the street, if you went up to a normal person in the street and you asked them on their opinion of macOS and then Android and then Windows, they would have the least opinion about Windows because they just don't care.
What they need to do, no presence. They need to do is just they need to do a new version of Windows that's consumer only.
Yeah,
and they don't need to mass release it. In fact, you don't mass release it. You make it cool looking. You make it like those videos that people do with the mock-ups, and then you make it invite only.
That's how OnePlus got off the ground, didn't they? The OnePlus One was invite only.
Because you'll see people, they'll get like some news outlet will get access to it and do it, hands-on. It'll be like, oh, here's Microsoft's secret operating system that they're testing. And it's going to generate a lot of hype. People will test it out. They're going to be like, oh my God, it looks so good. I want it. And then you're going to generate the hype around that, and you do a slow rollout with it that way, with people having like 2 or 3 invites. This worked on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
This worked on OnePlus, and that's what you do. And then you just allow people to naturally build up their desire for it because they can't have it. When you make things that, it's like one reason why people don't like iOS 26. It's because they're being forced to have it, right? They're being forced to change their UI. And it's like, at least on Android, you can change your icons easy enough, right? But like on iOS, I don't think you can. I don't know, if you can do jailbreaking anymore, right? And that's why, so people don't like it when everybody gets it and you have no choice. They don't like that. There's no fun in that.
Yeah.
When you make it exclusive, hard to get, invite only, you got to know somebody, and it comes out and it needs to release almost like accidentally. Like someone like Walking Cat's going to figure out, and people don't know Walking Cat. He's a famous hacker Windows guy on Twitter. He's going to find the URL for it, and people will be able to sign up and get, oh my God, I got the download link. I got it. I'm telling you, you do that and people will get back into Windows because that's just how dumb people are.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you understand human psychology and how people work, you can kind of figure this stuff out, right? And you just keep it you keep Windows 11 as your enterprise OS, right? Because they're not going to want this. They're not going to put up with this nonsense from their employees who want this thing. But you can just continue selling that as your enterprise operating system, support it for another 10 years, who cares? But you make this cool new version, opt-in for people. They have to jump through some hoops to get it. And then eventually you start putting it onto new hardware, right?
Mhm.
Or you make it an option in the box. Like, oh, we heard HP's new laptop, just this one new laptop allows you to install that operating system if you want it to, right? I'm telling you, you do that and it'll freaking work.
It's essentially viral marketing in a sense. Like,
yes,
it would be super interesting.
my best friend just bought a Tesla because he saw my Tesla and he's been exposed to my rant about how, despite how crappy Elon Musk is, how it's a fantastic car. And say what you will about Tesla, they're probably overvalued, sure, but their stock is through the roof. One reason their car has such value for consumers and people who buy it is because the company has zero advertising. They don't do a single commercial.
Yeah.
They don't have a marketing department. They spend all that money, they put it back into the company. Could you imagine how insane it sounds to launch a car company and be like, we're not going to do any commercials. We're not going to do
Right.
any ads. It's all word of mouth. That's craziness. Because every day you turn on the TV, all you're bombarded with are stupid car commercials. Yet they were able to do it and be successful, even despite Elon Musk being who he is. So you can do this, right? That is the world we kind of live in with the early. I mean, he also gets people to pay $5,000 and up to $8,000 for quote unquote full self-driving, which doesn't work. It's been promised for at least the last 8 years. It's been so overpromised that my new car has the hardware HW4, they call it. It's the latest updated sensors in the car that work with FSD. But if you have like HW2, 1, or 3, you have issues testing out the new software. Sometimes you're not even getting it because it's been promised so long that the hardware has evolved around it. So like, if they can do this stuff, Microsoft could do this, but they have to want to do it with the consumer market. And you and I have endlessly talked about this, that Satya Nadella and the current leadership isn't very much a consumer-focused company. Ballmer was. I still argue they didn't have the right people in place and there's too much infighting, but they could turn this around and be the consumer company if they wanted to. But I don't think they really want it.
No. Real quick, Ashin in the comments says, a new version of Windows every year is a stupid thing to do. Windows already gets a new version every year. That's what version 25H2 is, and that's what 24H2 was last year. I'm not saying, every year we should get Windows 11, Windows 12, Windows 13. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if every 3 to 4, or even, 3 to 5 years, we can get a new major version of Windows. We can still get the feature updates annually in the lifespan of a version of Windows that's on the market. It doesn't have to be a major new Windows product every year. But I think just to rehash what we were just saying, I think going back to just doing an annual feature update just makes sense. It doesn't make sense to do it the way they're currently doing it. There's no feature Microsoft is building right now that needs to get out ASAP. There's just not. It doesn't need to be there that quickly. I mean, you could maybe argue in the, when it comes to AI, but Copilot's an app. You can update an app every day. It doesn't matter. You can do what you want on Copilot. That's separate from Windows. Android isn't releasing Android 17 in 3 months' time. They just released Android 16. It's like, and same with Mac OS, and the same, like, these platforms aren't moving that fast. They don't need to. They can do all of this sort of AI stuff on top of the platform and then integrate it slowly into the platform annually. Like, that's what we're seeing with Mac OS. That's what we're seeing with Android. That's what I think we're going to see with Windows. I think, when Microsoft says they want to build an agentic OS, that doesn't mean they're going to slowly add features to Windows 11 over every month until it becomes an agentic OS. I think, no, there will be a moment where Windows,
you're going to need
Windows is agentic.
You're going to need deep plumbing to make this stuff happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to depend on so many things, from hardware all the way down. It's going to require, NPUs. It's going to require platform level changes. It's going to require UX changes. The interface of Windows will have to change to fully realize an agentic OS. It just will. We can't shoehorn this next gen, AI experience onto a UX paradigm that's 3 decades old. How old is Windows 95?
Yeah.
Like this, Windows today, someone who uses Windows today can probably navigate Windows 95. The desktop interface hasn't changed. AI is an opportunity for it to change. And I think Microsoft has teased that is what will happen. And I know for a fact that Microsoft has explored this. They have looked at UX paradigms. How can using a computer be different now that we have AI?
So 3 things.
Go on.
First of all, I want to just address a couple of comments. One, Gmail was invite only at first, I think. Correct. Yes, Gmail was one of those. Exactly. Gmail was an invite only service. I still remember when it came out. Same thing, you had to fight for invites to get it. And I think Gmail is pretty successful. Another person says, Windows Legacy for enterprises and Windows Next for consumers. Yeah, see, we already got the names for it, right? You just call it Windows Legacy or just keep it Windows 11. And then, Windows Next is what I was just describing. And then third thing I just want to say is, just to go full ironic, they should have AI design the new AI operating system.
Well,
the only problem with an AI operating system is the technology is moving so quickly that you got to bake this stuff into the operating system. But everything could change pretty quickly in terms of the powerfulness of whatever the AI behind it is running. So they got to make it so that that the operating system can still be flexible enough that they can insert new models when they need to and make things happen when they need to. And that's an interesting challenge as well. But yeah, they should do a Windows Next, totally change the interface and way people use it, and just do what I said with the release, make it invite only and stuff.
There's no reason why in the future you can't design your own version of Windows using AI. Just say, hey, I want my interface to look like this. I want to have the start button up there. I want to have the windows open in a circle, or whatever you want it to do. Ask it to do it, and it can vibe code your own desktop. I don't see why that's
AI. Yeah, imagine you let the Copilot design your own desktop for you.
I don't see why it couldn't be a thing.
That would be so cool. That would be kind of game changing. That would probably solve a lot of problems. And then you can have icon packs, which, you and I have talked about would be a cool thing to have, right? They could have it in their store. You just go download new icon packs and have it install over it. If there are even icons, who knows,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So I do think this Windows reorg is significant, and I do think it will mean Windows is about to get interesting again. I really do. I think the last couple of years, Windows has sort of been a bit boring. There's not been much, especially since Panos Panay left. It's sort of just been like, what are we doing with Windows? And so I'm hoping this is at the moment where Windows gets back on track and Microsoft repositions it as a platform for innovation again, because it does feel like Microsoft has sort of been just riding the wave of, these people have to use Windows, so we don't have to do anything to want to entice them to stay. And I'm hoping, but I don't know Pavan. I've met him very briefly at IFA last year, and I interviewed him a couple of years before he became the boss of Windows. But I don't know him as a person, and I don't think he's like Panos. I don't think he has that same level of passion. But at the same time, I think he still wants people to love the product he works on. And that's important. If you have that drive, I think that's all you really need. You don't need to be obsessed like Panos was, but you do need to want people to love the product you build. And I think Pavan has that. He wants people to like Windows. And so in the next couple of years, I think we're going to see quite significant changes and innovation. A lot of people will push back at the AI stuff. I think the idea of an agentic OS is something a lot of people don't like. Every time we write about it on the site, every time I see Reddit threads about it, people are like, yeah, no thanks, don't want that in my Windows, yada, yada. There will be pushback, but this is where it's going, and everybody will do it. Apple will do it when they can finally figure out AI. Google's definitely going to do it, whether that be through Chrome OS or Android or their weird merge thing. That's definitely going to happen. It's just happened. It's already happening in browsers. We're suddenly getting this influx of AI browsers. That makes no sense to me. Just leave it to the platform. The operating system should be the AI entity. The OS should be the AI, right? That's how I view it. That's just at a very foundational layer. The OS should be the orchestrator for everything you do on the computer. It shouldn't be that you open up an operating system to open up an AI app that then does everything for you. Just make the OS the AI and remove that middleman of an app. It doesn't need to be an app. It just needs to be in the OS. And so that's what I think we're going to see. That's the next 2 to 3 years of Windows, my prediction. And so, yeah, I think hopefully that's going to be interesting, and we shall see where it goes. But what's happening now, or in a few months at least, is also very interesting, and that is the next-gen Snapdragon chips, which were finally announced last week. Dan, you went all the way to Hawaii. Was it Hawaii? It was Hawaii. To see them get unveiled. Tell us everything.
So, yeah, it was pretty big news. This was only part of the portfolio that Qualcomm is announcing, as they typically do. So again, they're starting from the top with the X2 Elite. So this will replace the X Elite that is currently on market. And yeah, it's a big improvement in terms of performance and the NPU, which now they're going to go from 45 tops to 80, which is... It's a pretty big jump, especially since everybody else is like, we're at 50, we're at 40. So now you may be asking, and I asked, well, what are we going to do with 80? And they're like, this is just one, developers will be able to, and people who work in AI will definitely be able to make use of it. So in terms of working with large language models and training and doing that kind of stuff for local work, it'll be much more powerful. But it will also allow them to create apps and experiences that are definitely more powerful than today. And again, run those locally on your device. So it's more about future proofing, but it's a chicken egg thing, right? If you give developers the tools to do something, it's just like GPUs. Like, if you went back 5 years ago and I gave you a 5080 RTX card, you'd be like, what am I going to do with this? It's too much power. It's like, don't worry, eventually game companies will figure out a way to max it out. Like, you look at Borderlands 4 and stuff like that and the issues it's had, though that will happen. So that'll happen here too. And it's happened with CPUs, of course, over the years. Again, if I told you 5 gigahertz was possible, people are like, yeah, but why do I need to go that fast, right? But now we can, and clearly people want that. And that's the other thing here. So these new chips can go up to 5 gigahertz. And they it's got a new architecture this time. I forgot what the cores are actually called here. Let's see if do I have the screenshot ready? No, I don't. But there's like performance cores. And there's a different type of core now. So it's not
prime
cores. Yeah, prime cores and performance cores. And then 2 of the prime cores can boost up to 5 gigahertz, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so it's spread out a little bit differently now. But the real thing that they really focused on wasn't the X2 Elite. It was the X2 Elite Extreme. And to put this into categorization, but this is a subset of the Elite processor, even though it's more powerful, but it's an extreme version of the X2 Elite, right? So that means they could still have like an X2 Pro that would actually be a different architecture or slightly different configuration that would sit above the Elite, right? And maybe it'd have more memory, more cache, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I'm saying that's where this fits in, though. So the X2 Elite Extreme, it's on a 3 nanometer process. It has 12 prime cores and 6 performance cores. So it has 18 cores on it, that's a lot of cores for a laptop chip. And like I said, 2 of those can boost to 5 gigahertz. The rest run at 4.4 gigahertz or 3.6 gigahertz. Has 53 megabytes of total cache. The GPU is significantly more powerful now with DirectX 12.2 Ultimate, Vulkan 1.4, OpenCL 3.0, enhanced GMEM, and ray tracing improvements. You got the 80 TOPS Hexagon NPU. It now supports faster LPDDR5X memory or RAM going up to 9523, and it has a 228 gigabytes per second bandwidth on it. So those are all just kind of numbers and all that kind of stuff. What does that mean in the real world? So they have what are called reference design laptops. They look like just normal laptops. And they put these chips in there. And it's presumably something that obviously OEMs could make themselves and sell if they wanted to. And the reason I'm saying this is because, but OEMs can kind of do whatever they want with these chips. So they can put it into a fanless system. They can put it to a mini PC, and also have very different thermal profiles and performances compared to, say, putting it into a 15-inch laptop with dual fans and a heat pipe, right? So that one's going to be able to run way faster, more consistently, a longer period of time, but also probably use more power, whereas the other ones might be able to boost up to a significant amount of speed, but for shorter durations to maintain it, but also maybe more efficient. So they could control the TDP and all that kind of stuff. So it makes comparing this stuff a little bit difficult. Apple doesn't have this problem because they don't really have many laptops, right? So they have like the Pro, the Air, and variations thereof. But when it comes to Windows, everybody's going to do something differently. But to put into some perspective, the CPU for single core performance on Geekbench 6.5 is 41% faster than the nearest competition. I think it's fast, 41% faster than the previous CPU, which was just the Elite. And it does beat the current Apple M4. So it's 4080 versus 3872. So significantly faster. And it's 39% faster than the Snapdragon X Elite. When you go to multi-core, it crushes the M4. So on multi-core, it's getting 24,491, whereas the M4 only gets 15,000, right? So that's a massive difference. And it's 2 times faster than the current Core Ultra 9, Core Ultra Gen 2 9 CPU. 2 times faster than a Core i9. Like, that's pretty ridiculous. Now, I know people, are going to say, what about the M4 Pro and all that kind of. So the 14 core M4 Pro at least sits at 23,000 max, usually around 22,500. But so that's still 1,000 points less than this. So that's the M4 Pro. Now I know they have higher chips. I understand that. Listen, I think Apple will still beat Qualcomm in a lot of this stuff. And plus the M5 we know is going to come out. That said, a lot of the generational differences between the M2, the M3, and the M4 have been less and less impressive, right? It's fun to write about this stuff. It kind of doesn't matter, though, outside of the press and fanboys, right? Because the idea that someone's going to walk into Best Buy and be like, I need a new laptop. All right, which one do you want? Well, what are the Geekbench scores? Who has the highest? It's going to be, well, the Windows device here gets this score, and the Mac one, though, gets this score. And it's like, well, I'm a Windows user, but that's 2,000 points higher. All right, I'm going to get that. I'm going to switch everything in my life because of a score, right? So I want to put that stuff in perspective, because the real competition for Qualcomm is Intel and AMD, because they're competing in the Windows area, and they're trying to take over Intel's market share here, or at least steal from it, right? Because right now they're a very small percentage of Windows devices, but they want to get to like 30% in the next couple of years. That's the real competition. If it happens to keep people from switching to Macs, or maybe there's even a couple of Mac people who finally switched to Windows, cool. But that's not going to be huge numbers of people here. So when it comes to, like I said, Intel's current Core i9 chip that's on the market, it's 2 times faster when it comes to multi-core. Now, Intel is going to announce a new chip in a couple months, or very soon thereafter. So that gap will close. But I think if you're running an Intel Core i9 laptop currently, Core Ultra, And this is the 288V, I should say. And you can get 2 times the performance, plus you're going to get much more energy efficient because that's just the way ARM works here. I think that's pretty impressive. And it's 50% faster than the current Snapdragon X Elite. So again, generation over generation jump, that's pretty significant for them. GPU performance goes up 61%. So again, people have criticized Qualcomm's GPU for not being as powerful. It's faster by a lot. It's faster than AMD's Ryzen AI 9 HX370. That's the one that's 61% faster than that. And AMD is always like held up as sort of like the poster boy. It's significantly faster than the Core Ultra 9's GPU, of course. It's way faster than the Apple M4. Now, the M4 Pro will beat it, of course, but not the Apple M4. And yeah, it's also much faster than the Intel Core Ultra 9 288V. So yeah, I was comparing the H and the V chips. They're kind of similar, though. So this is a big deal, though. The GPU on this thing is going to be very powerful. Don't forget, currently you can game on Qualcomm chips and hit between 30 and 60 frames per second on some games at full HD with no problems whatsoever. They also mentioned how there's 1,400 games now optimized for ARM. So by that, I mean, not that they just happen to run on ARM, but that they've been actually tweaked to leverage the ARM GPU. So 1,400 games so far. And Microsoft is on the cusp of releasing the first ARM anti-cheat kernel stuff into the insider channels. So that's coming real soon. That's one of the big holdups right now with gaming. It's like Call of Duty, Fortnite, all this kind of stuff have these kernel level anti-cheat software bits that are required to run the games. And they're not ARM compatible, so you can't run those games. At least in certain situations, you can't. And so that's going to be fixed very soon, which will definitely level the playing field on all this stuff. And then I already went over the NPU stuff, right? So it's 5.7 times faster than the Core Ultra 9's NPU. It goes to 80 tops, which is pretty massive. So these are all huge jumps for what are basically ultrabooks, right? We're not talking gaming laptops. We're talking your 13 and 14 and 15-inch thin and light devices that are going to weigh 2.5 pounds. Like, these are absurd speeds. That 5 gigahertz is the first time an ARM CPU has hit that, which is pretty impressive. They've also, I should say, the extreme version of the Elite has a memory in package design, meaning it shares the memory across the CPU and GPU, which is basically what Apple does in the M4 and stuff. This allows the system to allocate memory to different things where it's needed on the fly. It's also more streamlined and faster. So this is going to be kind of like a really big deal also. Now, the big question, of course, is when does this stuff come out? 2026 is when it comes out. Now, they said the first half of 2026, but they're very confident that that's closer to January, February, March versus June, right?
Right.
I'm pretty confident we're going to see a lot of announcements at CES of these devices, which means they'll probably start shipping February, March, April, May, in those months, right? Microsoft has done March Surface events before, so that may happen as well. But yeah, so that's when we can expect that stuff, which would be timed for when I expect Intel's new chips to also ship. So that's going to be really interesting to see the spread there. AMD, I'm not sure. I don't really follow AMD that much, and I haven't heard anything yet. But it's going to be a very interesting year next year for performance on these devices. The battery life is going to be 10 plus hours easily. You're going to get 2 times the processing power as you do now. I mean, this is, and mind you, they're only on Gen 2. I know like, well, Apple's M5 is going to come out soon. Yeah, they're M5 on 5th generation. Qualcomm's on its 2nd generation, and they keep getting closer and closer, as well as just. So I expect that to continue to happen over time. And I think that's just great for consumers. Now, I should also mention that we do expect an X2 Plus and an X2 chip probably announced sometime next spring or something like that. And those will be the more affordable versions, fewer cores. I assume they'll probably keep the 80 tops though for the NPU. That's what Qualcomm's thing has been, is that all their NPUs across the line, regardless of price, is the same. Also, GPUs will kind of vary, but none of this is surprising. But I think it's all the limitations on ARM are going away, right? Adobe was there. Everything now is going to be ARM compatible. They announced that. There's a Razer. It's going to make their Synapse software ARM compatible. There was just a lot of momentum, a lot of companies announcing software support for this stuff. I mentioned the anti-cheat stuff for gaming is coming along, and more support for games as well, especially since now that the GPU is actually it's really significant in terms of being able to handle these games. So I think this is great. You and I are both big ARM fans and Snapdragon fans specifically. Although I told Qualcomm, I'm like, listen, this is the first time I'm running a laptop 7 pretty regularly. I don't really feel like I need an update to the hardware. Now, as a reviewer and someone who gets these to take a look at, I'll take it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to be like, it's too fast. But I don't really feel like, I don't know, like, okay, it's going to be faster and all that, but I'm wondering how much better it's going to kind of feel. I don't really game either, and I'm not processing video in terms of like rendering. So from my experience, I'm curious what it's going to be like, but I don't really feel like, and I say this for people who maybe are just about to buy or are very just recently bought something with a X Elite or X Plus processor in it. I wouldn't feel bad about this. Don't be like, oh, I should have waited, because yeah, it's going to be significantly faster. But I don't know how many people are using laptop 7 and being like, it's slow as heck. Oh, this thing is terrible. I doubt there's very few people. I don't know. What do you think about all this?
No, I think you're right. I think the current Snapdragon X is great, and it's the same thing Apple has faced, right? Like a lot of people who bought those M1
Right.
MacBooks, kind of to
Aren't
this day,
upgrading.
like, yeah, I don't need the M4. The M1's more than fine. But there's always going to be new people who are upgrading from something older, and I think especially with Windows 10, excuse me, Windows 10's end of life, there will be a significant chunk of people in the next year who do want a new laptop, and they're going to be very well treated with these Snapdragon X2 devices. I am super excited for these. I think I've been the Snapdragon X Plus is more than enough for me for what I do on a laptop. Like, I have a desktop for any heavy lifting stuff, but when it comes to laptop, the X Plus is great. So, the X2 Elite and the X2 Elite Extreme are like probably a bit overkill for me, but I'm still excited to try them for sure. The air quotes delay, I don't think it's probably not fair to call it a delay, but the fact that they're coming in 2026 is a bit of a bummer. It does mean that we're probably not getting new Surfaces this fall like we normally do. The Pro 12th gen and the laptop 8th gen will probably come in the spring next year. Ideally with these new Snapdragon chips, maybe it could be with Intel as well. I have no idea what the plan is in regards to chips there. Yeah, that will probably be when we next see Surface. So there'll be a very quiet year for Surface this year. The only devices we did get were the smaller Surface Pro 12-inch and laptop 13-inch, which are fine devices, but nothing like groundbreaking. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm sort of over Intel. Intel can turn it around if they come out with a chip next year and it's amazing. Then sure. But
I think they will. I think the new Panther Lake chip that's rumored will be a significant bump for them. And it'll, like I've said before, the Core Ultra Gen 2 stuff, it really has improved efficiency in terms of battery life. It really is narrowing the gap. And I think they'll kind of continue that way. But, the Extreme here has 18 cores. I don't think Intel's going to have 18 cores in their chips, at least not for the Ultrabook level, right? And that's why when I mentioned those scores, Qualcomm obliterates everybody. It's because they just have more cores. It's just like that's just it, right? So, and I think because of that, especially with this kind of new architecture, things just kind of run better. But yeah, we're not going to get a new Surface now. So again, not every 12 months, right? It's going to be more like 18 months before it might be even closer to 20 months. But I'm okay with that in a sense. Again, it's like, well, I want real innovation, right? Because like when I use a Surface Pro 11 or Laptop 7, there's nothing on that device right now. It's like, it would be perfect if
Yeah.
it had
Yeah.
this, right? Yeah, I would like an anti-reflective display, make it bigger. I don't know, make it OLEDs. There are little things you can do, which will be nice, but not game changing, right? But at least if they throw in these new chips, it won't be game changing for you and I, but they're going to be so powerful compared to what,
Yeah.
like twice as fast as a Core i9 is kind of insane to have in a Surface Pro when we were just talking about like years ago how slow these chips
Yeah.
were, right? And it was always the Surface Pro was always held back by the chips where it couldn't run as fast as people wanted it to. It always ran way hotter than people wanted it to, and the battery life was always abysmal, right? Now all three of those problems are not only solved, they're like the leaders in the category. That's just like pretty awesome. So I kind of can't wait for that stuff at least.
Yeah, and I'm also hoping to see just more form factor variety with this new gen. Like I think Snapdragon really dominated laptops. There was a few 2-in-1 slash tablets and a couple of mini PCs, but I'd like to see more mini PCs. I'd like to see more tablets, and I'd also like to see desktops, like tower PC type
Yeah, I
devices.
don't know if because of motherboards, the expectations when you go to the towers are different because then you
Yes,
get
I
into
know.
well, can I add an NVIDIA GPU to it? Now,
No.
Qualcomm, when they are asked that, will give you the same answer they've always said, which is
Mm,
there is nothing technically limiting the fact being able to add an NVIDIA GPU outside of NVIDIA not wanting it to.
mhm.
In other words, they just made the drivers for it. It would work. But NVIDIA, I don't think has incentive to do it. Now, they did have an all-in-one on display, which was really cool looking. And they did have two mini PCs that were really small. One looked like a coaster, basically. It was like a large coaster. It was a flat metal disc, basically. And it didn't even have fans. They used the new, what they call airjet kind of technology that's in there and stuff like that. So hopefully, yeah, you can make basically little tiny desktop PCs with this thing that are extremely powerful that take up no space. And that's kind of cool for a lot of people who want that sort of effect. But I think like I said, when you go to a tower, it's like, well, why do I need all that space for? It's to put GPUs in and other cards. And that's not quite, there yet for this device. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm super excited. I probably will. I'm gonna wait for the Surface. I'm probably not gonna get the first Snapdragon X device that comes out, X2 device, but I wait for Surface, see what they do with it. But yeah, I'm super excited for the Snapdragon stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, I've been using the new HP EliteBook 6 series laptop. I brought with the trip and middle of writing that review up with the HP Go, their 5G stuff. That's running only a Snapdragon X Plus chip, right? And it has 32 gigs of RAM though. Had no issues with it whatsoever for me. It
Yeah.
was more than enough. The battery life was incredible. I plug it in often, but I never needed to. The 5G was great. So for this event, I had to upload a video to our Slack channel, and the hotel Wi-Fi was just abysmal. Like it would have taken me like 45 minutes to upload this 500 megabyte file. And I was like, well, this laptop has 5G. Let's see what it can do. 4 minutes. 4 minutes I uploaded it, which was just like, and that's why when people are like, why have a 5G in your laptop? Yeah. Could I use my phone? Yeah. Would have I been 4 minutes? No, it would have been slower because you lose bandwidth when you're tethering. I get it. For some people, it's a good thing, but having 5G built in and just being able to do that on the fly and just having my laptop connected all the time, it's just so great when traveling. So But again, I can use a Snapdragon X Plus chip, and I'm super happy with it. No performance issues whatsoever. So selling me on the Elite Extreme, like I'm really curious what that's going to feel like to use it. So, but
Yeah, I
again, they
assume the
did.
Elite. So go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly that they, we did real world live benchmarking there, right? So they had all the machines lined up, and we can run Geekbench and all these things, so we can see it. It's not that they were just like imagining the stuff or making it up.
Yeah, I assume the X2 Elite Extreme is sort of going after the MacBook Pro, crowd, right? The higher end MacBook Pros, not the entry
Yeah,
level ones for like people who drink coffee in Starbucks. People actually use MacBooks for like creative work. Those sort of people.
yeah,
That's what the Elite Extreme's for. Is that sort of equivalent, I assume.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and we'll be curious about the cost of it. How much more expensive it is. I'm not really
Yeah,
sure, but we'll see.
it's minimum 48 gigs of RAM, isn't it, for the Elite Extreme? Or is that configurable?
Something like that, yeah. And then, because it's splitting the memory, I think. And
Mhm.
then, it can go up to 128 gigs. Actually, it can go higher than 128 gigs, but
Yeah.
I doubt we'll see anyone do that. But yeah, it's going to be these are going to be, and for people who work in music, there are a lot of music apps there too. Like they can do on the fly. Like one of the things they demonstrated, which was kind of cool, is for a game streamer. Like you could be playing a video game and streaming at the same time, but then she also was using this voice changer,
Right.
which changed her voice in real time to various cartoon and different types of characters, which was pretty wild because of the NPU was able to do that while the GPU and the CPU handled the streaming and the gaming stuff, right? Yeah, so for those people, like that's something that wasn't the market share typically for these devices, but you're going to be able to soon use these as just full-on gaming laptops, so long as you don't want 4K, 320-second refresh rates and all that kind of stuff. And those will still be out there for the pro gamers. But if you just like are a gamer but don't need the best and you're okay with like full HD at 60 frames per second, these laptops are going to be a really good option now, which is again, not something we typically have said before. I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I do wonder if maybe next year we'll see like a Surface Laptop Pro with the X2 Elite Extreme, and then a normal Surface laptop for the standard
Right.
Elite, and then like an X Plus for the
Yep.
smaller one.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the limits are and all that kind of stuff. Someone's asking, is the RAM upgradable or soldered? So it's
Depends.
technically up to the
Yeah,
OEM, but they've all been pretty much opting for soldered,
soldered.
for the RAM at least. There are exceptions that can be made. Usually you get them in gaming laptops where they're already 15, 16, 17, 18 inches. They're already a quarter inch thick. They're already 5 pounds, right? Those give you that flexibility, and that market kind of wants it a little bit more. But when for these devices, a lot of these OEMs are going to go for super thin and light laptops. You got to go soldered for that to achieve it. And I understand a lot of people don't like that, but the number of people who don't like that pale compared to the people who want the super thin laptop. And that's just what OEMs are seeing. The storage is almost always upgradable. I mean, I don't think I've ever really seen soldered storage. I've seen hard to, that's difficult to access. But even Surface has mostly solved that. It's like you can upgrade your Surface storage, except for the Surface Pro 12-inch. But all of the laptops, you can pop them open and swap out the SSD and all that kind of stuff. So that won't be an issue.
Yeah. So is that everything for the Qualcomm stuff?
I believe so.
Awesome. Right. Well, let's move on then to a couple last two stories for the show, and that is to do with subscriptions, Microsoft subscriptions. Weirdly, they had a lot of announcements around their subscriptions this week.
Yeah.
We'll start with the Microsoft 365 news. This week, Microsoft announced a new subscription dubbed Microsoft 365 Premium. And this is a $20 a month subscription that combines Office and Copilot Pro. Now, if we cast our minds back, I think we've talked about Copilot Pro on the podcast before, and we've both said that $20 a month just for Copilot is excessive. It would make more sense if it included Office alongside it And now it does. So Microsoft 365 Premium is essentially the replacement for Copilot Pro, I suspect. It doesn't make sense to pay for them both separately at this point. So for $20 a month, you do get access to the entire Office suite as you would normally in Microsoft 365 Personal or Family. And then you also get the Copilot Pro stuff on top of that, all for $20 a month, which is, I think, a fantastic deal. It's available straight away, I believe. And also comes with some new icons. Those new icons are actually for all Office users, of course, but they announced the new icons alongside this new premium subscription, which is really cool. So they actually gave us a quick rundown of all the new stuff that's part of the subscription. So you get access to your standard usual Office apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, Outlook, with Copilot built in. You get access to researcher and analyst powerful reasoning agents announced for commercial customers, which is available in the Microsoft 365 Copilot desktop app today and is coming soon to Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. You also get early access to innovative features like Office Agent and Agent Mode that transform a single prompt into expert quality documents, spreadsheets, and presentations. Microsoft's highest usage limits for select features like 4.0 image generation and voice in the Microsoft 365 Copilot and Office Suite. Highest usage limits for select features like 4.0 image generation, podcast, deep research, vision, and actions in the Copilot app. Access to the new Photos Agent app and 1 terabyte storage and Microsoft Defender Advanced Security. So you actually get quite a lot for your $20 a month. I actually think this is a great idea and is why I'm now going to be a Copilot Pro user, because I was not subscribed to Copilot Pro before. I didn't see the value in it. But now, I believe I'm paying. What am I paying for Microsoft 365 Personal? Probably $9.99, I think it is, or $8.99, something like that. I think $10 more.
You pay yearly for it?
No, do I pay yearly? Oh, I think I might pay yearly for it. Yeah, I think it's 80 quid or something like that here in the UK for Personal. Or maybe it's 60. I can't remember how much it is. But now I think for the extra $10 a month, I think it makes sense. Because of the Copilot, especially for access to Copilot Labs, because Copilot Pro subscribers usually get access to Copilot Labs features first.
Yes. Yeah,
and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Microsoft is very expert. Like, they do try some weird stuff in Copilot Labs, and it's nice to have access to that. So that's really nice. Dan, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I pay $20 a month for Copilot Pro, which if my SO found out, she'd be very mad at me because she's
what a fool.
But I use it so much. I use it like all the time, and I've been using it for work. It helps me with some ideas. It helps me shape ideas. I use it because I'm just a naturally curious person and I'm always looking up stuff. And it's just awesome. So, I was paying $20 a month for it. Now I won't have to. Okay, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Because I already I have the Microsoft 365 family plan, whatever that is. I assume that's part of it. I don't know. Does the family plan get this?
Yeah. So it essentially replaces the family plan, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. So I'm happy with it.
I'm curious what happens if I try to move to this now, because I think I have 2 years left on my Microsoft 365 family. How does it work? Do I just get upgraded to this for 2 years, or do I don't know how it works. Or does it just give me a refund for the old thing? I have no idea. So I'll have to look into that.
Maybe.
But yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm going to certainly look into that for sure. The other Microsoft subscription news this week was to do with Game Pass. Now, this is less good news. It's actually mostly bad news. This has actually set the gaming world on fire. But Microsoft announced pricing changes and benefits, frankly, to its 3 Xbox Game Pass subscription tiers. So they've renamed the 2 base ones. So Game Pass Core and Game Pass Standard are now known as Game Pass Essential and Game Pass Premium. Game Pass Ultimate still exists, and PC Game Pass is also still a thing. But prices are going up for the PC Game Pass and Game Pass Ultimate. Prices, as far as I'm aware, are remaining the same for Game Pass Essential and Game Pass Premium, but you're actually getting more features. So that's good news there. The 2 base sort of entry-level tiers of Game Pass are getting new things. So the access to the gaming library is now being doubled in size, so over 50, and it will now include PC and cloud games on top of console games, which is really nice. It also includes unlimited access to Xbox Cloud Gaming, though there will be queues. So before you could only have access to a certain amount of times a day, but now there's unlimited access, but you may have to queue for certain games. So no pricing changes there. So essentially, you're getting more for your money if you subscribe to the 2 lowest tiers of Game Pass. If you subscribe to PC Game Pass or Game Pass Ultimate, prices are going up significantly in the case of Game Pass Ultimate, but you are also technically still getting more features as well. So Game Pass Ultimate is going up from $20 a month to $30 a month. And that's bad. A lot of people are not happy with that. That's too expensive. People say that's now $360 a year, which is absurd when you think of it that way. It's not great. And Microsoft, even with the added bonuses like EA Play Vault access, which was already there before, sorry, it's Ubisoft Plus Classic access. And what else is new? Unlimited access to cloud gaming and stream your own game, which is
the Fortnite stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm looking. Is that not part of Ubisoft Plus? It's not mentioned here in the article I'm looking at. In-game benefits for I see it. In-game benefits for Fortnite Crew subscription. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's part of it as well. I don't know if that's worth an extra $10 a month, but this is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. A lot of people are looking at this and going, this is no longer worth it. $30 a month is just not worth it. A lot of people are saying they're going to downgrade to Game Pass Standard. Or even Game Pass Essential. And a lot of people are saying that they're just going to outright cancel their subscription. I think this week there was an even story saying that the website that allows you to cancel Game Pass crashed because so many people were trying to get access to it, which is unfortunate. But it's really not great. Microsoft, I feel like Microsoft has increased Game Pass pricing like every year for the last like half a decade. It feels like they have. And now it's $30, which is a big ask. I don't know, Dan. I mean, I know you don't really play Xbox anymore. Are you even a subscriber to Game Pass?
I am, only because I review so many laptops. A lot of them come with 3 months free, and you can stack them. So I just keep adding it to my account. But I'm doing that less and less. So eventually I will run out.
Yeah.
So Ubisoft Classics, online console multiplayer. Oh, no, that was already there. The thing with Fortnite
Crew
stuff, like, I think the problem here is I feel like they could have or should have just created a different tier. Like it would have been nice if they just kept the $20 a month one as is, and then here's a $30 a month one with those new features in it.
Right.
Like, if they did that, I don't see the problem. It's just like, okay, you get even more stuff, and for the people who want it, that's cool. Problem now is it's like you're being forced to buy the higher tier package. You may not want that stuff or really care about it. And I think that is where it is kind of really wrong here. Like, I don't know why they didn't they could have invented a new word, Xbox Game Pass Ultimate Pro, right?
Yeah.
They could have just done that, and I think I would have been okay with it. But people don't like paying $15 a month or $18 a month for Netflix, which keeps going up, and everything has gone up, right? And it's just like, for a while there, $15, it was $15 a month, like that was doable for a lot of people, especially how much you got. But now it's just the value. Sure, you're still getting a lot to it, but you really now have to, like, if you're paying $30 a month, $1 a day, like, you better be playing a lot of video games and really take advantage of that. Because otherwise, I don't see how it makes sense. Especially someone for me, I don't play the AAA games, right? I usually just go for a lot of indies and stuff anyway. Like, I just get those on Steam, wait till they go on sale, get them for like $8 or $10. At least then I own the game. I don't know. I think there's, I bet they modify this. I really do. Like I said, they should just create an upper tier and just go with that. And like, why do they need to jack the price up and insert new features? Why don't you just like not insert new features? Like, I don't know. It's just like, I feel like they don't need to do this, right? They could have just created another tier, but we'll see.
Yeah. Microsoft's handling of Xbox has been really questionable, I think, in the last couple of years. Like, things are going well now on the handheld front, only because, everyone forced them to sort of kick themselves into gear and get something going there. And even then, it's not perfect. Like, Windows is still too heavy compared to SteamOS, and there's a lot of more optimizations that needs to be done. But like, even when it comes to console hardware, like there's this feeling, I think, amongst a lot of Xbox fans that Microsoft is slowly trying to step away from console. They don't want to deal with the hardware anymore, and that's why they're slowly opening the platform up as an ecosystem so they can sort of hand off the hardware side to partners and then only deal with the software and ecosystem side. It is, I don't know. It does. I do worry for Xbox slightly when it comes to Microsoft. And I think that's been how a lot of people feel about Xbox for at least half a decade, if not longer. It feels like Xbox has to always justify itself to the senior leadership team. Like we exist for this reason, and they have to shoehorn, all of Microsoft's annoying commercial dreams into their Xbox vision, like AI and Azure and all this other stuff. It's like, Xbox is an Azure product. It's cool. We now did cloud streaming, and that's all Azure. That's great. Okay, cool. You survived this round. But next time, when the next commercial innovation comes around, how are you going to integrate that into Xbox? AI is here now, and I think AI is gaming's biggest challenge yet for Xbox, because how do you integrate AI into games? Like, how do you integrate they've tried this thing now. They've got the gaming Copilot, which you can ask it for tips on how to play this game and stuff. But it's kind of like, that's just Copilot. There's nothing gaming to it. You can ask normal Copilot how to play a game, and it will give you an answer. So I think it will be really interesting to see what Xbox does when it comes to AI in the next year. I think the NPU and this idea of offloading game generative features within games onto an NPU, if there is an NPU on the next gen Xbox, which I'd be surprised if there isn't, that could be a way into AI for sure. But we'll have to wait and see, I guess. But it does feel like Xbox is always fighting for its life at Microsoft, and I don't know why. And
I charge extra for the AI stuff per month. That'll be a subscription too.
Yeah. Who knows?
No, you're right though. I think they are feeling the pressure to just generate money. And this is the problem with capitalism I've always talked about, which is the system presumes infinite growth, that you could just
doesn't work.
Not only keep making money, you just keep making more money every other quarter. And it's just like, that's not sustainable. At some point, you just reach market saturation. And so you got to have something else new that comes out, right? And you just keep growing and growing. It's an insatiable monster. It's like, it'll never... And eventually you hit these limits, and then it's just like, oh, they're failing. And then, all of a sudden is Microsoft doomed. And it's just like, it's such a weird system, right? It's just why we have so much, you joke around when you come over here to the US, you look at the supermarkets, how much food choices we have for stuff. It's absurd because that's what happens. It's just like, oh, you like soda? Here's 42 versions of it, right? It's just like, it's absolutely insane. But that's the world we live in, and that people apparently want. And so, they're going to eventually just have to vote with their wallets. And, I don't blame people for quitting this stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous.
When did being a loss leader stop being so appetizing to companies? Loss leaders, right. I feel like companies had loss leaders all the time. And now
think because they have to justify... They have to justify it to their shareholders. That's what the customer is. It's the shareholder, not you and I. We're the product that's being sold to. But ultimately, you can't be every quarter, well, let's report our Surface numbers. Well, Surface lost, $200,000, but they're very popular and people give them very good reviews. Shareholders are like, excuse me, why am I giving you money? Make that area profitable. It's like, well, this is how we're going to make it profitable. Then we've got to cut out all this stuff, right? And it's just it's a tough thing to balance, which I guess gets into the whole which I don't want to talk about because I didn't follow it too much, but EA going private, right?
Yes.
Right. Dell went private a couple of years ago because of these same reasons. Because once you go private, you don't have to deal with this BS. You can just be the company you want to be, and just as long as you're making profits, that's fine. It doesn't need to be infinite growth and more profit every year to satisfy shareholders. You could just be, hey, we're making enough money where we can pay ourselves and employees, and we can take money, reinvest it into the company to create new product. Everything's cool. This is why I also hate venture capitalism, because venture capitalism is just, it's a short circuit. Instead of waiting for the market to naturally adopt stuff, you flood the company with a ton of money so they can innovate faster and be first to the market and dominate the market. But then if that doesn't work out, that company is saddled with tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of debt owed to these venture capitalists, who then come in and be like, well, we now own your company, get out, and we're going to sell it off for the lowest amount. Like, you see this happening over and over again. It happened to a lot of media companies. And it's just it's a weird system,
It sucks.
Yep. And on that note, let's wrap up the podcast. So, I think we'll do some Q&A with the audience if there are any, but otherwise you can follow us on Twitter and I guess Blue Sky and Threads. I logged out of those of my desktop PC, and so I got to relog into them. So I haven't checked them in a while, but yeah, hit me up on Twitter, hit Zac up on those as well. Otherwise, we do record this every Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. You can go to YouTube, our YouTube channel, and watch them there, or join a live broadcast and be a part of our audience where we'll interact with you and answer your questions, of course, as well. But as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
Awesome. That was
I guess I could have done. Yeah. I could have done a thing of the week, but we were running a little long, so.
No, yeah, it's fine. I'll say it's the longest podcast in a while, I think.
Yeah.
So if there are any questions, please do put them in the chat. We will hang around and answer them. If there are no questions, then we won't. We'll leave. So get them in there. When will the next version of Xbox ship? What specs? So the rumor is next year is, I think, when Microsoft will unveil the next Xbox. That doesn't mean it will be available next year. It could be a tease next summer and then available the year after. Or it could be that we get tease later this year or early next year and it comes out late next year. So within the next year or so, I think, is when we'll start hearing more about the next Xbox. We know it's going to be powered by an AMD chip. There is a code name for it. Let me see if I can find it for you. There definitely is a code name for it. I've seen it. Maybe it's not public. It must be public. It'll be a Gen 6 CPU architecture, so that's nice. Magnus is code name. There you go. So look up AMD Magnus and you'll find out all of the leaked specs so far. Any idea when the next Windows LTSC release will be declared? No. Didn't Windows 11 get an LTSC release last year, 2022? There is a Windows 11 LTSC, isn't there? I don't follow this closely, so I wouldn't know off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure there is a Windows 11 LTSC. But yeah.
Dan, did you actually get to use the new Qualcomm hardware? No, not really. They're reference designs anyway. It wouldn't have really made that much of a difference since that laptop isn't going to be sold. Not that I think they did. It was not like it was sitting. It was running at room temperature. That it wasn't sitting on like dry ice or something like that. They weren't like doing any weird shenanigans to get those numbers. So I think they'll be pretty realistic compared to. We went through this before. A lot of people on the very first X Elite numbers, they did the same thing at Snapdragon Summit, and people are like thinking they were fake numbers on this. And I was just like, there is so much legal like issues that they have to deal with when publishing these numbers, meaning that like they cannot in any way be faking or fibbing this stuff, because then their investors could literally sue them for. So not even like you and I could sue them for like a false advertising. Like their investors could sue them because they're getting ripped off, right? So there's no reason to doubt those numbers. In fact, they could be better even on some devices, right? But that should be a pretty accurate reflection. Someone's also asking about, do those devices have a BIOS in them, like the x86 devices, so you can overclock, change OS and overclock it? You can't change the OS because Linux doesn't have drivers that can run these chips.
That's not entirely true. I believe Linux can run on some of these ARM devices. It depends on obviously which distro you're running, but there are efforts to get that up and running.
There are definitely efforts. I could say it's not officially supported. Qualcomm, as of right now, does not officially support or work with Linux for these chips. Same thing with Chrome OS. Now, we did talk about last week how Google has their new Chrome OS. That's a combo of Android and Chrome OS coming out, and they will be working with Qualcomm. So that will happen at some point. But yeah, there's really not much for that. So they don't really, I don't think they don't really have a BIOS for one. They have a UFI. But I've never really even tried to go into them. There really isn't a lot of options out there. It's not like x86. There's not a lot of hacking going on with these kind of devices. I've never seen about overclocking either. I don't think that's a thing. Will Snapdragon laptop battery be similar to phones without shutting it down? It's a weird one.
Yeah.
It'll be similar to the Snapdragon battery life is you get about 10 to 16 hours, depending on the device, of real world usage. It doesn't shut down. It goes into, if you don't use it for a couple days, I believe it goes into a hibernate where you have to open the screen and then it takes a little bit longer for it to come back on. Otherwise, it's instant on. So if you just close it for a day or less, you just open it just on, basically. It comes on. So I don't know what to tell you. It's the same architecture as the stuff in the phone. So yes, you're going to get the same improvements in performance as well as efficiency. And it's definitely more efficient than x86, though x86 is catching up in some ways. So will there be Snapdragon desktop CPUs? We talked about that. You'll see them for mini PCs. You'll see them for all-in-ones. I don't see it coming to a tower because you have to create motherboards then usually that are sold on the market for those. And it's weird because what are you going to use the tower for? Because you're not going to be able to put an NVIDIA GPU in there because NVIDIA is not going to do the drivers for it. So then it's like, what are you doing? So desktop in sense of a mini PC or all-in-one, yes, you're definitely going to see that because why not, right? And they had reference designs there for that. So they are pushing into that market, but I don't think you'll see like a tower sold. No, I don't think ever.
I joined the podcast late. Any update on Surface Laptop 8 and if Surface Connect is going away? No updates. All we know is that it won't be this year. You won't be seeing any new Surfaces this fall, unfortunately. Probably spring next year, hopefully, or early spring next year.
Ubuntu works on X Elite devices, specifically the Lenovo one. So there you go. I could just tell you that Qualcomm, when you ask them about Linux, they're just like, it's not a thing for us. We're not concerned with it. We're not trying to work with the Linux people. I'm sure the Linux people can get it to work and do things, without them, but it's not a focus. These chips are regarded as Windows chips. How about Snapdragon will do gaming PC in the future? Yeah, I mean, when you say gaming PC, though, you're talking like real hardcore performance usually. You're talking, and for that, you're going to need an RTX 5060, 5070, 5080, 5090 GPU, right? And you want that to power so you can play 4K gaming at 120 frames per second or full HD gaming at 380 frames per second, right? No, I don't think you're going to see Qualcomm in those. I think that market is NVIDIA's market and a little bit of AMD here and there, but it's mostly just NVIDIA. I don't see them cracking that, especially since we know NVIDIA is going to make an ARM processor. So they're going to come from the other end. You're going to see, I think, NVIDIA, and NVIDIA could do a desktop then, right? Because NVIDIA will have its GPU and will have its ARM processor. But you're going to see NVIDIA come at this from that end, the high performance stuff, high-end gamers, high-end desktop. And then Qualcomm is going to come from the other end, which is budget devices, right? We can already see a lot of Qualcomm devices that are $500 that are really, really good and get excellent performance and battery life, and then they go up from there, and then they meet in the middle, basically. So I think you'll see that. And so, so you will see those Snapdragon, I think, chips go into handhelds. I think that's definitely, absolutely going to be on the tables because these new chips will allow you to do full HD gaming, which is where we're at right now with handhelds, basically, right? And people are totally okay with that, especially since on the smaller screen, full HD gets really good PPI, all that, how that works. So I think that's very much going to absolutely happen.
Someone was asking, so what are you most excited about for Windows V Next? Well, like I said, we don't really know explicitly what Windows V Next will be yet, but this idea of an agentic OS, this idea of a UX that's been built from the ground up around AI capabilities is very interesting to me, and is something that I know Microsoft is exploring internally. And so I'd love to see something of that nature ship, something new, very AI focused, very agentic, something that can orchestrate your workflow just by asking for it with your voice or with a keyboard or whatever you want to use. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm excited for Windows V Next, in air quotes. Is it safe to assume that first-party Xbox hardware will serve the same purpose like Surface currently does, allowing OEMs to make affordable SKUs while they license out this Xbox PCOS? Yeah, I think that's probably a sensible assumption to make. I think with Xbox becoming an ecosystem and Microsoft allowing third-party hardware makers to essentially license the brand and create their own devices running Xbox OS or the Xbox platform, Microsoft will do its own hardware, but it will be like the North Star, the shining star, the lead by example product. So here's what an Xbox is, and other OEMs can build upon that platform. But this is the foundation of Xbox is Microsoft Xbox. Then Lenovo can come out with their own Xbox, or AMD, or whoever makes, not AMD, but you know what I mean. Asus, I meant to say, not AMD. Asus could do their own as well. Could be anyone. Someone was asking about ARM gaming devices. I think what you'll find soon is ARM-powered handhelds. I think that's not off the table in the foreseeable. So that'll be interesting.
Someone asked, do you think it's the max optimization that makes ARM just work while ARM on Windows is bad? So I have contention with this. I don't know what it means with ARM on Windows is bad. I use ARM laptops every single day, and I prefer them over Intel and AMD. So what's wrong with me? And Zach is the same way. So there have been challenges. It's such a tough question to answer. So first of all, there were the challenges with that. Qualcomm doesn't design chips, right? Qualcomm licensed chip designs from ARM, and then they tweak some stuff and add their stuff to it, including NPUs and GPUs and all this kind of stuff. Make it, and then they send it off with that design to a factory to manufacture the chips. And then it goes into phones, and that went into laptops. They tried that for many years. And ARM, who was designing these chips, just was not making chip designs that were on the level that Apple was, or for what Qualcomm was trying to do. So the guys that designed Apple's chips left because they want to make more money. And they formed their own company called Nuvia to make ARM processors for servers because they saw that as a big market opportunity. Qualcomm heard about them and talked to them and bought them. And then they took those guys, and those guys took their existing designs, modified them, and put them into the first Snapdragon X Elite and X chips that we have now. The new chips that we are getting now, the X2 series, are completely redesigned based on having more time. These are chips that are actually designed for laptops and stuff like that versus a modified kind of server chip. And now that's why, so the people who make the X2 chips were the same ones who designed Apple's M series chips. So, there's that. There's also the fact that Windows itself is an operating system that's technically like 40 years old at this point, if you throw in MS-DOS. And they can't break compatibility. So they don't want to. And where things did break, they need to recode stuff. So they had to recode the operating system to support ARM and be optimized for it. They have to recode all their apps to support ARM. They have to recode the tools to give to developers so that they can do this for their own apps, right? So that's a whole process. Why did Apple not have this problem? Because Apple's tiny compared to Microsoft when it comes to the laptop and PC market. And so they can snap their fingers and be like, we're switching from x86 to ARM. and everybody has to change over, or your apps just won't work anymore, and people are going to be mad. And they can force that to happen because there aren't, like right now, with people not wanting to get off of Windows 10, a 10-year-old operating system, and people are fighting them on that, right? Apple doesn't have this problem. Their market share is so small that they can just pivot really quickly. They don't have to worry. Half of laptops and PCs sold is enterprise, right? You know who doesn't have that problem? Apple. Most of their market is consumers who will just buy a laptop every year. They don't have IT restrictions. Companies have a lot of custom software that they need to run. And so they're not going to just be like, we're dropping everything because Microsoft said so. So it's just different markets. So it takes Microsoft a lot longer to make this kind of shift and support this new architecture, where Apple was able to do it overnight. So that's the only thing we're seeing in real time. But we're now at the tail end of this. Windows is completely optimized for ARM at this point. All its inbox apps are optimized. You're seeing a lot of third-party support now. A lot of Adobe apps now work. You're seeing a lot of third-party video editing and sound apps all working on this stuff. You're seeing video games working on it. Again, and the funny thing is, I said 1,400 games are now optimized to run on ARM. You know who doesn't have that? Apple. Apple doesn't have 1,400 games that run on its devices. Like, they'll come out and they'll be like, we now have 5 new games that support our chip. So like, why don't you ask Apple why it's so bad? Because they can't run video games despite their powerful GPUs, which everybody seems to point out to me. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't game on them, which is pretty much what a lot of PC people do. I don't, but a lot of PC people do. And you can game on Qualcomm. So, I can flip this stuff the other way around. I can also ask you why a company like Asus can sell a 14-inch OLED Full HD laptop with a 90 hertz refresh display that weighs like 2.2 pounds for $599, and Apple can't do that, right? So all this stuff, it flips around depending on the market, but that's your big answer there.
Other than mobile, what was the worst thing Microsoft did in your opinion? It could be hardware, software, etc. I think what Microsoft is currently doing with its obsession with AI is hurting a lot of other Microsoft products. I think it's hurting Surface. I think it's hurting Xbox, and I think it's hurting Windows as well. I think the biggest thing Microsoft is doing wrong right now in regards to Windows is they've just stripped all of the fun out of being a Windows user. Like, nobody loves Windows. There's no reason to be fanatical about Windows currently, and that's all Microsoft's fault. Microsoft did that themselves, and so that's my answer is how Microsoft has sort of stripped the fun out of Windows. Whereas if you look at Mac OS and Android, people are still fans of those platforms. People are excited every year to hear about what's coming next for Android, what's coming next for Mac, what's coming next for iOS. But no, you don't find people like that about Windows in the mainstream press, tech press. We are the only people left who sort of care still. and that's Microsoft's fault. Microsoft did that. That wasn't us. That wasn't anybody else. Microsoft made that choice to de-emphasize Windows, and that to me is their biggest sort of bad thing that they're currently doing.
They're always guilty of that when it comes to the consumer market. They just sort of like, well, we have this other thing that's doing, either it's doing awesome or it's doing terrible, and we need to fix it. So like, that's why they screwed up Windows Mobile initially. It was because Windows Vista was terrible. Even though they had a lot of market share, it was on fire. And so they had to put all their resources, they said, to that, while ignoring what is literally the next big thing coming, that they were technically already there, already had market share, and they were just dumb enough not to figure out that something that they called a pocket PC like wasn't going to evolve to what we have today, which to me is still like just so egregious. It's just like, isn't this the whole point, that someday we have little portable computers in our pocket that are as powerful as our desktop? Like, so they missed that because they were too focused on fixing Vista. And right now, it's the opposite. They have AI, which is the big thing that they're trying to race to, which, to their credit, they're doing pretty well with it. Even though there's a lot of competition. Of course, you have OpenAI and you have Google out there, which is nothing insignificant, but they're putting all their money now towards that. And so I feel like their other stuff is sort of getting, it's put on the side. It's very frustrating. But yeah, that's just how.
I think what's probably even more frustrating for Microsoft is that Copilot is nothing compared to the other sort of big AI giants currently. Like ChatGPT and Gemini are massive. Copilot,
No, they're not. OpenAI, yes. Gemini is less than Copilot, I believe.
maybe maybe you're right there. But I
think,
just find it fascinating how people choose to use ChatGPT over Copilot when they're basically built on the same foundation, and Copilot's more free.
right. I think it's like I said, we talked about that before. It just depends where you come from. If your first use of it is ChatGPT, you kind of think that's all there is. If you're on Windows and you never tried it, or you tried Copilot, you kind of stay with that. If you've only used it on your phone, you're using either ChatGPT, Grok, or whatever, or Gemini, right? So it depends on your like ChatGPT could be really amazing. I have an account, but I don't use it because I use Copilot. But you could be like, ChatGPT's way better. I'm like, yeah, but I kind of just like Copilot. And plus, Copilot now has all my stuff, right? My memories. It knows me more. And that's going to be a critical thing. It depends on what it can plug into. Like you and I have this issue, right? Can we use Copilot for work? No. Our company uses Gemini. We have Google stuff, so it's just like, that sucks, right?
Yeah, I think people will really find an issue with when it comes to Copilot is because there is no Windows Phone, because there is no Microsoft mobile
Right.
platform.
Yes. Yeah.
When these AIs do eventually become agentic and are able to sort of help you out and keep track of everything you do on your computer, people will want that information to transfer to their phone, but then also have the agentic AI be aware of everything you do on your phone. Now, on Android, that's probably possible. Copilot as an app, since Android is such an open platform, you can probably give it a permission where it can watch everything you do on your phone, and so it can carry that context with you across devices. But iPhone won't allow that. There's just no way that iOS will allow Copilot, a third-party app, to be able to see everything you do on your phone, like an agentic OS with Windows would do. And so I think especially iPhone users are going to find that they are, getting used to agentic Windows and it's learning about them and it knows what they're doing, but then they move to their phone and Copilot's trapped inside an app now. It's like, because it doesn't understand anything. It's not aware of the context of your phone. It doesn't know what you're doing on your phone because iOS doesn't allow it that permission. That's going to be a problem, I think. And that puts Microsoft on the back foot immediately for not having a mobile platform. Whereas Apple will do it, it's agentic OS, which will span across all of its platforms and it will sync data and it will carry context across devices easily. I'm convinced Google is building Chrome OS on top of Android for the next version for this same reason. It's going to be the same OS that spans phone and PC, and it can carry your AI context across devices. Windows won't have that. They won't be able to because they are only on PCs, which could actually kill Windows on PCs. If your agentic OS on your phone doesn't talk to your computer, then what's the point? Like, they're useless to me. They can't even interact. I need to move to something that does interact with my phone. And I think people will prioritize the phone over the computer in that scenario, I think.
I don't have like firm numbers, at least from this source, but ChatGPT, including Copilot, is 51% of the market. Google Gemini, 23%, Perplexity, 12%, Claude, 9%. Then the others have 5%. But if you want to break out just Microsoft 365, the problem is that you have it in Windows, Edge, Microsoft 365, GitHub, and mobile. Active users is estimated to be 85 to 90 million monthly active users worldwide. Growth trends slower than rivals like Gemini and Perplexity, but Copilot's strength is its deep integration into daily workflows rather than standalone app hype, which is totally true. That's something that Perplexity. Something is talking to me.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's where I'm muddled up with the numbers, because obviously when I think of Copilot, I think of Copilot the app, but Copilot isn't just an app. Copilot is an experience within other apps like Word and Excel and Outlook.
Yeah,
and I'm guessing Microsoft counts usage of that version of Copilot towards overall Copilot usage numbers, whereas I wouldn't. I'd be like, no, Copilot Word does not count as Copilot. That is a tool within Word. Copilot the app is Copilot, and how many users does that have? But it's tiny.
I disagree, but I see the point. Enterprise penetration, around 43% of Fortune 500 companies report active Copilot deployment, average 6 to 8 prompts per active user per day. Most common use cases: drafting emails, summarizing meetings, and formula generation. That's in Outlook, Teams, and Excel. adoption curve, strongest in finance, consulting, and tech sectors, slower in government and healthcare due to compliance. I think they're in a pretty good position. Like I said, their position is it's the fact that it runs through all their products. Like they really did pivot super quickly to just jam it into everything, which we all made fun of them for, but that was their advantage versus a standalone app. Because then once you start using it in Word or you start using it in Outlook, it kind of makes sense that it has access to all your stuff. You start using it elsewhere. At least that's the plan. If you just have a standalone app, like it really can't go into your emails. Does it have access to your calendar? Can it do things in Word? Can it becomes less useful. It just becomes like a thing to talk to, basically, or ask questions.
Don't you think that's exactly the reason why Microsoft is doubling down on AI? They don't want to repeat the mistake from Windows Mobile, but will they miss out on something else in that process? Well, no, yeah, it makes total sense that Microsoft is trying to be at the forefront of AI. I just think a lot of things are suffering in the interim, because we're not at a point where AI is ubiquitous and it's capable of doing everything we want it to do. Yet Microsoft is basically dropped everything to try and prioritize AI, and it is, I think, impacting other parts of the company. Hard, and it's making products worse overall as Microsoft tries to shoehorn AI into everything it can.
I don't think they're wrong for
No.
prioritizing AI. I mean, arguably, it literally is going to be the most important thing in computing since the internet.
Yeah.
And the fact that they have like so much reach and input and already, I think is actually a brilliant move. And it's one reason why their stock is just like through the roof. But Zach's right, where it seems like other things are being sacrificed for that, including employees who were getting laid off, right, to fund this stuff. And I think that's the shame. It's just like, well, if you do that, like you can't also lose Windows, because if you lose Windows, you're going to lose your entry point for a lot of this stuff, right? And that's already the downside of not having their own phone.
Yeah.
Because if Windows Phone right now could be Windows Phone Copilot AI, like that could be its core feature. And it would have access to all this stuff, and they would have been way ahead of Apple and probably even ahead of Google with it, but now they have to, now it's just an app on this phone, right?
But the other thing is like, well, if Microsoft wants to be so far ahead in AI, then they need to invest in AI hardware. They need to start thinking about wearables and how is AI going to integrate ubiquitously on people. And they're not thinking that way. Like Google's already announced that they're doing Android XR, and that's going to be an AI platform. It just is. There's no world where that isn't AI. Yeah, and Apple's
I just showed you that report. Yeah, Apple is pulling back on Vision Pro, shocker, and they're going to focus on their glasses because Meta is just crushing it. And so you have Apple now pivoting towards that. They'll have something around 2027. You have Google, who's already well ahead there too, and then of course you have Meta, who's already been dominating the market. And we haven't heard a peep from Microsoft, even though the company had HoloLens. So they clearly could have worked on something. Especially when they had Panos.
Microsoft needs to be working on wearable hardware. It needs to be working on glasses or some sort of wristwatch or whatever some AI pendant thing will take shape. It needs to have something. If it doesn't have an AI front when it comes to hardware, it will lose the AI race. It's as simple as that.
I mean, and to their credit, they even pivoted super quickly on this for PC, right? Like they came out with AI PCs, and then they came out with Copilot Plus PCs, the whole branding. Look how fast they got the keys onto laptops as a requirement. Like that happened all really quickly, right? So they did do that, I think, correctly. The downside was people were buying Copilot PCs and they're like, all right, now what? Like, what's so different about it? Now we have some like cool features and stuff, but they need to fill that out, and they are. But I think they did a great job with that. So we don't give them enough credit for those kind of things. But yeah, we still got to see a little bit more.
Is that it for questions? Yeah, I think that's probably it. So thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back.
Wait. If these Snapdragon X Elite chips can run on small devices, will be available on phones. Also, like proper Windows Phone comeback. There we go. So the X Elite doesn't need to run on a phone because they have the Snapdragon X Gen 5, which runs on phones. So they already have, those chips are related to each other. They share a lot of the same NPU and GPU features and all this kind of stuff. In fact, the camera system for ARM laptops, Snapdragon laptops, is the same as your smartphone system, which is something that Intel ones had issues with. So you already have that. We're not going to talk about Windows Phone coming back because we know that's not going to happen. So.
All right, yes. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We won't be back next week because I am away towards the end of next week, but we should be back the week after that. So yeah, we'll follow us on the socials. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.